Hello, thank you. All right, so you've just heard a real-world example of the impact of a ransomware attack. And it really brings home, I think, something we don't talk about all the time. A lot of my colleagues in the US government, myself at the FBI included, we talk a lot about nation-state actors, the most highly sophisticated cyber threats. But the reality is the type of malicious cyber activity that most Americans experience comes from cybercrime. The scope and scale of this cybercrime can be hard to get your head around. Let's just consider statistics from one source, the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, or IC3. One type of crime, business email compromise. This is a crime that takes scams to the next level, using malicious cyber intrusions for the ultimate goal of bringing about fraudulent transfers of money. Globally, just at IC3, we've seen incidents reported from all 50 states and 177 countries, so nearly all of them. In terms of dollars, in the past 5 years, the domestic and international losses from business email compromise total more than $26 billion. And then the type of cybercrime we just heard about, ransomware. The statistics at the Internet Crime Complaint Center actually show that the number of incidents may be steady and not actually increasing. But the financial cost of those incidents is increasing. And the type of targets that those attacks are being perpetrated against are some of our most critical. In calendar year 18, according to IC3 stats, the losses due to ransomware were $3.6 million. In calendar year 19 to date, we're not even through the whole year, that number has already doubled to $7.3 million. And the types of targets are some of the most impactful: hospitals, schools, municipalities, first responders, the types of victims who can least afford to be offline. And that's what the people perpetrating the attacks are counting on. So this activity is pervasive, and it can often seem faceless and impossible to stop. But it's not. Let's look behind the curtain. Criminal schemes on this scale are complex. So you might ask yourself, how is it that criminals have all of the different skills and accesses and capabilities they need to perpetrate cybercrime on this scale? And the answer generally is that as individuals, they don't. You know what? This is boring. Let me try to illustrate this in a more compelling way. It's hard to see you with the lights, but how many of you have seen one or more of the Avengers movies? Okay, that's a pretty good sampling of you. All right, so let's step away and let's imagine a script for an Avengers movie that never got made. This is the long-lost, rejected Avengers movie, the movie that was never made. So our chief villain, Thanos, he wants to destroy the Earth, but he knows that he by himself doesn't have the skills or the power to take on the forces of Earth directly. So he looks at who he's stacked up against, and he looks at the individual Avengers and the infrastructure that supports them. He looks at their fancy costumes, he looks at the cool toys they have, and he says, I know how to fight them. I'm gonna drain money from the infrastructure that supports them so they can't afford to fight me back. But he doesn't have the skills to do this by himself. So what does he do? He assembles a team of people who have the individual specialized skills he needs to do this type of scheme. So he calls together members of the Black Order, and each of them has a power. So Ebony Maw conducts spear phishing attacks, creates really sophisticated ways of getting you to open an email and click on a link. Proxima Midnight develops and distributes malware. Supergiant develops all the infrastructure, domains, servers, virtual private networks, and figures out how to turn those over faster than law enforcement can keep up with them. And then Corvus Glaive is the financier, figuring out how to launder the money, use cryptocurrency, cash out to make sure the operation's a financial success. So how do you counter this? So in the script of this rejected movie, it's not going well here on Earth. We've got Captain America, he's a law and order guy. He just wants to indict everybody. Hulk, he just wants to smash them. Black Panther is identifying networks with risks and using his powers to heal them. AntMan just wants to negotiate. Iron Man's providing cybersecurity, but only to paying customers. Hawkeye's imposing sanctions. Spider-Man is working with his friendly neighborhood, state and locals. And Thor is overseas working with international partners. But they're doing their own thing. In this movie's plot, Thanos is bringing together this highly skilled, differentiated team of cybercrime masterminds. And together, they're combining their talents in massive schemes that are having a real global impact. Meanwhile, our heroes are arguing over who to call when there's a cyber incident and whether there should be a national level coordinator to coordinate all their activities. It's chaos. But then Captain America and Black Panther are at a cybersecurity conference and they run into each other at a vendor table. And they get to talking and they say to themselves, well, what if a call to one of us was a call to all of us? What if, instead of working individually, they could just, assemble and turn their individual specialized skills from a liability into a strength? I'm not going to bore you anymore with this script, but you can imagine where it goes from there. It's actually better at this point to transition into a real-life example of our heroes in action. So let me tell you about a cybercrime scheme called Eve. As you know, the internet is largely reliant on revenue generated by advertising. Advertisers pay when websites have ads that get clicks, and Eve was a scheme that capitalized on this. It was a botnet-based ad fraud scheme that operated between 2015 and 2018. So imagine a global botnet of infected computers that had fake web browsers loaded onto them with fake web pages and fake ads, and essentially generated fake clicks so that ultimately companies were paying for clicks on ads that humans never actually saw. And this involved more than 2 million infected computers worldwide and generated more than $29 million for the criminals, which meant $29 million in losses to companies. So a group of US and foreign agencies and private sector companies got together to figure out not just how to temporarily disrupt this activity, but how to pull the plug on the entire thing. And this required significant planning, technical analysis, trying to figure out all the different pieces of infrastructure being used, all the different actors who were bringing together their specialized skills to formulate this activity. This team had more than a dozen private sector companies in a working group led by government. It involved nearly a dozen foreign countries whose departments of justice and law enforcement worked with those of the US. Ultimately, this group working together identified 8 subjects, all of whom were Russian-speaking, or actually Russian nationals, or nationals of former Soviet countries. There was a 13-count indictment that was issued with various criminal charges against these 8 individuals. And their movements were tracked across Malaysia, Bulgaria, and Estonia, with multiple countries involved in that tracking. Meanwhile, this private sector team was working with the US government on how to take down infrastructure. And the key was bringing together the knowledge and the capabilities and the authorities in a sequenced, coherent way. So that what ultimately happened is that at the time the individuals, with the help of foreign law enforcement and our legal attachés overseas, were arrested, nearly simultaneously, nearly a dozen domains that were being used by the criminals were sinkholed or redirected. Nearly 80 servers were seized, and at the same time, those criminals were arrested. So essentially, rather than just trying to eliminate the individuals, the entire operation went dark. So you're probably thinking, okay, Russian nationals, well, that's nice that we indicted them. That's, they're never going to see a US courtroom. Well, the good news is they already have. All 3 of the arrested individuals were extradited. 2 of them, just about 2 weeks ago, changed their pleas from not guilty to guilty. And the 3rd one is awaiting sentencing. We also work domestically and with international partners to seize bank accounts, executing seizure warrants for accounts in Switzerland, Estonia, Kazakhstan, and the Czech Republic. Clearly, this would not have been possible if the different elements of the US and foreign government, private sector, didn't work together, not only to share information, but actually to plan collaboratively to achieve a more impactful result. And those types of results don't just happen for the big companies and the people who are losing tens of millions of dollars. That is important. But we're also applying the same model for individuals who, as I mentioned, are the people who are experiencing the bulk of this malicious cybercriminal activity every day. Our Internet Crime Complaint Center last year created a recovery asset team that works with banks to actually pull back those fraudulent financial transfers, get the money back for people who unwittingly agreed to send their money to a criminal. Just one case, a woman whose mother had died and left her an inheritance of about $50,000. She was using that money to purchase her first home. She got caught up in an online scheme where an individual posed as her lender and convinced her to wire him money. Through the Internet Crime Complaint Center in partnership with banks, we were able to get that money back. That makes a real impact on somebody's life. So in closing, I think the next time we all focus on who's in charge, which agency's best, which agency's biggest, maybe we should be asking ourselves a different question. Why don't we just assemble? Thank you.